Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant will also be. My Father will honour the one who serves me. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven. "I have glorified it and will glorify it again." The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, "This voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now is the time for the judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." He said this to show the kind of death that he was going to die. The crowd spoke up. "We have heard from the law that the Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" Then Jesus told them, "You're going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going." This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. It's really good to see you here today. As you'll know, there's been such a lot of talk in the news this week about people seeking glory. And in fact, as I record this talk, the outcome of the US presidential elections still isn't clear. Hopefully by the time you watch this, there'll be a little more light and a little less heat. But in John 12 verse 23, Jesus says the hour has come for him to be glorified. You'd think those who voted for him would be thrilled. But what is the glory that Jesus is talking about? Well, he says in verse 24, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." Jesus is talking about the glory of a grain of wheat. I mean, how glorious is that? Here's a picture of some ears of wheat, and we know if the crop isn't harvested, it will just continue to grow. But eventually, at the end of autumn, the ears of corn will all fall to the earth. The crop will be ruined. It just goes back to the soil, never to be seen again. But each of those ears has the power to germinate in the soil, and so it can become next year's crop of wheat. And so the picture here is of a harvest field, abundant. And Jesus says it actually has to do that. It has to go into the soil. It has to die if it wants to be fruitful. Sue and I used to have a rather fetching little display in our kitchen. It's pretty with the stalks of wheat. And in fact, there's only one thing wrong with it. It's completely dead. It's attractive, but completely lifeless. And each ear of wheat is perfectly preserved forever, because these grains of wheat never fell into the ground and died, and so they can never bear a harvest. Because unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. And so that's the image that Jesus uses to explain his own life That's how he sees his own ministry in the world. He knew that not everyone would believe him, let alone follow him. He knew he would be despised and rejected by most. That's what the cross is all about. But rather than simply saying, well, what a tragedy, Jesus saw that there would be a harvest, a glorious harvest. And in his death, Jesus paid the price for all human sin and selfishness and warfare and brokenness. As thousands of years ago, the prophet Isaiah, and then 2,000 years ago, St. Peter said, by his wounds we are healed. By what Jesus did on the cross, on the grain of wheat falling into the ground and dying. That was how our healing, how our salvation was accomplished, as it was all paid on the nail. So Jesus looked beyond the cross to an amazing harvest. Not only his own resurrection, but also the salvation of all, like us, who put our trust in him. And that's what the empty tomb shows. It reveals the resurrection of Jesus and indicates our destiny if we put our lives into his hands. Because unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. And I'm part of the amazing harvest of Jesus. And I hope you know you are too, if you've put your trust in him. So the miracle of new life is not just an accident of biology. It's a reality and a promise for us today. That out of the most unpromising of circumstances, God can still be powerfully at work. And so this Remembrance Sunday, maybe you're also wearing a poppy. Maybe you're remembering people you know who you've known and loved who have died. We remember all who fell to the ground in war and died. Those whose lives were suddenly snatched from them. War is always a bad thing, even when it's the least worst option. So we're not glorifying war, but we certainly honour those who have paid the very highest price, and in so doing have preserved the lives of others they'll never get to meet or be thanked. The harvest of lives living now in peace because of their sacrifice. And so out of the cold, hard concrete of death in warfare, there can be an unlikely harvest. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. So the question for me, for you, for all of us, is which do we prefer to choose for our own lives? What do we want to be? We could choose the option of a beautiful kitchen display, resisting change, holding on to what we have, but ultimately lifeless. Or we could risk letting go of our own lives and to put our hands into the hands of God, to trust the living God who even raises the dead. And then we will see and share the harvest, not only for ourselves, but in bringing new life to others. May you know yourself to be part of the harvest of Jesus. And may you be willing to be obedient to your own call from God, to let yourself die to self, that there may be a harvest of fruit and peace and blessing from your sacrifice.